Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking at two, well, giants of influence head to head, but maybe not in the way you'd expect.
Right. The usual conversation, it always seems to circle around finance, around capital. Think BlackRock.
Exactly. And our mission today really is to explore why BlackRock, this huge asset manager controlling trillions, might actually be less structurally concerning
Structurally, yeah.
than the software giant that kind of runs the hidden infrastructure of our daily lives. I'm talking about Oracle.
Yeah, we've dug into quite a few sources here, and they paint a really stark contrast. It's about the quality of influence, not just the sheer amount of money involved.
Okay, unpack that a bit. BlackRock versus Oracle influence.
Well, BlackRock has very visible macro financial power, trillions under management, global capital flows. It's huge, but it's sort of out there.
Regulated, generally understood, right?
Generally, yeah. Whereas Oracle wields this quiet, embedded power. It's micro-institutional. It's woven into the fabric of things.
So our goal here is to give you, the listener, a shortcut to understanding that difference. What does it actually mean when power isn't just about money, but about infrastructure?
Precisely. The implications are pretty profound.
Okay, let's try to break this down. Maybe using that Feynman approach. Keep it simple. Find the core idea.
Good idea.
So the common thinking is control the money, control the world. That's the BlackRock model, right? They manage the global money rails.
Absolutely. And their power is enormous, no question.
Right.
But like you said, it operates mostly within this known financial world. There are rules, fiduciary duties, audits, regulators watching the assets.
Their main tool is capital allocation, deciding where the big money goes.
Right. Now, Oracle, they control the data rails, the operational guts of institutions.
So think less portfolio manager, more system administrator for society.
That's a good way to put it, yeah. Their influence is deeply embedded. It's in your health records, how you're identified by the government, how benefits get processed, critical stuff.
Daily life systems.
Exactly. And core logistics for massive corporations, too.
So, okay, boiling it down. BlackRock decides where the investment money flows globally. Oracle decides, fundamentally, who you are on paper and how basic essential services actually get to you. Is that the core distinction?
That's the absolute crux of it. The leverage is different. It's not abstract capital. It's concrete control over data flows and processes.
And that's the insight we really want you to take away today. It's a different kind of power.
And that's the
Right.
so what? Right. We're trying to shine a light on this silent machinery, the systems that handle identity, healthcare, government functions.
Because when power is structural, almost invisible like this,
It needs just as much scrutiny, maybe even more, than Wall Street, which is comparatively transparent. We need to look beyond the funds and really examine the pipes.
okay, let's make this concrete. Let's talk about specific examples showing Oracle's structural power. This idea of operational lock-in is key here.
Yeah, lock-in is critical. It's where getting out of Oracle systems becomes almost unthinkable because the cost, the risk of failure is just too high.
And the leverage isn't really financial pressure, is it? It's something else.
It's more like gravity. We call it data gravity. The sheer mass of data, the custom code, the years of staff training built up inside their system. It makes moving prohibitively difficult. Price almost becomes irrelevant. Hashtag Mayo. Healthcare data gravity, EHRs.
And the most powerful example has to be healthcare. Specifically, Oracle getting into electronic health records, EHRs, by buying a big player there.
Right. And EHR, look, they aren't just databases. They're the central nervous system for hospitals, clinics, public health agencies. Incredibly complex, deeply interconnected.
Once a hospital puts one of these massive EHRs in.
Their whole world rebuilds around it. I mean, everything. Surgical planning workflows, how doctors get warnings about drug interactions, the super complex billing and coding, pharmacy operations, integrating radiology images, even the portals patients use to see their results.
The software literally becomes the institution's operating system.
Absolutely.
So we need a strong analogy here. How about this? Trying to migrate from one big EHR system to another, it's like attempting a heart transplant while the patient is running a marathon.
Wow. Yeah, that's stark, but it really nails the risk involved.
It's technically incredibly dangerous, right?
Unbelievably dangerous and incredibly expensive. We're talking years of planning, potentially hundreds of millions of dollars. The technical challenge alone is staggering. You're not just copying files.
No.
You're mapping millions, maybe billions, of individual clinical data points, diagnoses, lab results, meds, doctor's notes, images from one company's secret sauce format
Their proprietary schema.
into another company's completely different format, all while juggling strict privacy rules like IPAC. It's a nightmare.
And if that migration fails, or even just gets delayed significantly,
The consequences are immediate and severe. This isn't like your company email being down for an hour. This is patient safety.
right?
A system outage, bad data mapping. It could mean a pharmacist gives the wrong drug dose, a surgeon misses a critical allergy note, a whole clinic might have to stop seeing patients because they can't access records or schedules.
So this gives the vendor, Oracle in this case, immense leverage. How does that break down?
Well, three main ways. First, switching costs. They are just astronomical, ensuring deep, deep lock-in. Nobody wants to risk that heart transplant.
Okay.
Second, you get massive scope creep. The EHR starts as just records, but then it takes over scheduling, patient communication via portals, internal performance analytics. It worms its way into every single staff member's daily job.
Making it even harder to imagine replacing.
Exactly. And third, the data lock-in becomes total. Years, decades of patient history, every diagnosis, every procedure, every visit, it's all structured inside Oracle's specific data models. The hospital builds up this enormous technical debt they can basically never repay.
So what this means, practically, is that the vendor, through its software updates and product roadmap, they effectively become a co-manager of the hospital, or even public health policy.
Yeah, absolutely. If the government mandates a new reporting requirement, or the hospital wants to implement, say, a better telehealth system.
It doesn't matter how urgent the need is.
Nope. It all gets gated by when Oracle decides to update its system, or if it even can. Not by patient needs, not by regulatory deadlines. That is profound structural control over actual healthcare delivery. #tag B government and critical systems.
And this same dynamic, this lock-in, it extends right into government services too, doesn't it?
Directly. Oracle provides the core technologies, stack the databases, the cloud infrastructure, the middleware for incredibly sensitive public systems.
Like what kind of systems?
Think large-scale identity verification, how taxes get processed, how unemployment or other benefits are administered, critical logistics for both civilian agencies and defense, managing citizen cases, really fundamental stuff.
When a government agency depends on your proprietary tech for something that central.
You're not just a vendor anymore. You become a structural gatekeeper for policy itself. It stops being about who owns stock and starts being about who controls the servers, the data formats, the specific software pathways that a new law must pass through to actually affect a citizen.
So you're essentially the policy execution gatekeeper.
That's a perfect term for it. Imagine a new law changes, say, who's eligible for food assistance. That law is just words on paper until the code changes.
Right.
The database has to be updated to track the new criteria, the application interfaces need to be rebuilt, the processing workflows reprogrammed. And if that underlying government system is decades old, incredibly complex, and only really understood by Oracle engineers,
Then Oracle effectively dictates how quickly or even how accurately that new law gets implemented.
exactly, they control the timeline and sometimes even the interpretation by controlling the technical feasibility.
And just the inertia in government procurement must be huge.
Massive. You've got multi-year, multi-billion-dollar contracts already in place. You have thousands of government staff trained for years on one specific system. Even if a theoretically better, cheaper alternative pops up.
The agency is basically paralyzed. How can they even evaluate it fairly without risking blowing up the whole operation they rely on?
It's incredibly difficult. They can't easily run independent tests or pilot projects without deep vendor cooperation, which might not be forthcoming if it means losing the contract.
And the stakes for ordinary people are so direct here.
Immediate and personal. Delays in benefit processing, glitches in a tax system. That's not abstract. That's a family missing a rent payment. That's an elderly person wrongly denied care because some data link failed in the background.
And security breaches in these systems.
They're catastrophic. You're not just losing credit card numbers. You're potentially exposing core identity data, social security numbers, addresses, health details, family connections for millions of people. That kind of exposure creates lifelong risks for individuals. #tag C, the ad tech legacy.
Okay, so to really grasp the implications of trusting Oracle with all this critical health and government data, we probably need to look at their history, right? before this big push into industry clouds.
Yeah, that history is really relevant because before focusing heavily on things like EHRs and government systems, Oracle built a massive and frankly very effective advertising technology machine.
What did that involve?
It involved things like data management platforms, DMPs, building complex systems, using cross-site trackers, third-party cookies, all designed for really sophisticated tracking of user behavior online for targeted advertising.
Okay, but why does their past in ad tech matter now when they're selling, say, hospital software?
Because it reveals the company's cultural DNA, you could say, and definitely its deep technical talent for building something very specific. Large-scale, cross-context identity graphs.
Define identity graph for us.
An identity graph is basically the ability to connect the dots, to take all these scattered pieces of information about someone, what websites they browse, what phone or computer they use, which apps they open, maybe even offline purchases from data brokers,
And stitch it all together.
into a single, persistent, highly detailed profile or dossier on that individual, mostly used in ad tech to figure out who saw what ad and whether they bought something.
So the skill set and the tools needed to build that for selling ads.
Are fundamentally the same tools and skills needed to consolidate sensitive public records. Think about stitching together someone's health records from different hospitals, their identity documents from the DMV, their benefit status from social services, across different government silos that don't normally talk to each other.
If you're good at building that identity graph for commerce,
You possess the core technical capability to do it for public sector data too. The technology itself is largely agnostic.
so this history of competence in mass data aggregation, even if for a different purpose back then, it really frames the trust debate today, doesn't it?
Absolutely. As Oracle pushes deeper into health, government, critical infrastructure, questions about their past practices with data collection, even if the business model has officially shifted, have to inform how we think about governance and oversight now.
Okay, so let's quickly summarize this section before we move on. We're seeing two really distinct types of risk emerge.
Yeah. BlackRock's risk, generally speaking, is macro-financial. It impacts markets, asset values, maybe overall economic stability, big picture stuff.
Whereas Oracle's risk is micropersonal and institutional. It hits individuals directly, their identity, their dignity, their safety, and it affects the basic operational stability of critical institutions like hospitals and government agencies.
Right. It's not just managing capital, it's controlling the fundamental digital rails your actual life runs on. A very different beast.
Okay, so we've established this deep structural power Oracle's built over decades. Now let's pivot to how they're monetizing that, specifically through this huge and maybe slightly strange bet on AI infrastructure.
Yeah, this is where things get really interesting financially. The numbers involved are just astronomical, and we really need to question the mechanics behind them.
Absolutely. Let's start with their stock price. There was that moment recently, #tag8day, the stock surge and the backlog.
Oh, yeah, that was wild. Oracle's stock jumped, what, 30% in a single day?
Incredible. Adding more market cap than McDonald's or Goldman Sachs is worth, just like that. It briefly made Larry Ellison the richest person in the world, I think.
And the crazy part, the real paradox here, is why it jumped. It wasn't because they reported amazing profits.
No, quite the opposite. They actually missed expectations on earnings per share and revenue for that quarter.
Right. This wasn't about current performance at all. It was entirely a bet on the future.
Driven by this aggressive shift into becoming a major provider of specialized infrastructure for AI companies, basically building these massive custom data centers needed to train and run large AI models.
And investors who are absolutely desperate for ways to play the AI boom beyond just buying NVIDIA stock,
Which is already priced incredibly high.
they started looking at Oracle, this nearly 50-year-old enterprise software company, and treating it like some kind of born-again AI startup.
And the magic number that seemed to trigger this frenzy was this announcement about their backlog.
Ah, yes, the RPOs, $455 billion in remaining performance obligations.
Okay, let's define RPO quickly for everyone. It's basically the order book, right? Contracts they've signed for services they haven't delivered yet.
Exactly. And the market sees that $455 billion and thinks, wow, guaranteed future revenue. Huge number.
Huge. But hold on, $455 billion. We need to apply some critical thinking here, maybe that Feynman lens again. Let's look inside that number.
Yeah, because when you dig into the sources, the details are pretty concerning. That massive figure isn't spread out nicely. It's incredibly concentrated.
Concentrate.
Almost all of it comes from just 4 contracts with only 3 clients.
Wow. Okay, that level of concentration is a massive risk factor right there. The whole valuation surge is basically riding on just a handful of deals.
And the biggest client by far, OpenAI.
Right. They announced this plan to spend over $300 billion with Oracle.
Specifically between 2027 and 2031, 5 years, for just enormous amounts of AI computing capacity.
And to deliver that, Oracle has to build data centers that consume, what was the figure?
4.5 gigawatts of power, continuously.
4.5 gigawatts. Just to put that in perspective for listeners, that is slightly more electricity than the entire country of Bulgaria uses.
It's an almost incomprehensible scale, and the reliance on one single client, OpenAI, for the vast majority of that headline-grabbing backlog, it's frankly terrifying from a risk perspective. Hashtag B, the financial circularity and sustainability question.
Okay, so that scale, that concentration, it leads directly to the next big question. Feynman Principle 2, identify the gaps. We have to ask, is this even viable?
Exactly. How on earth can OpenAI possibly fulfill a $300 billion commitment to Oracle?
I mean, they're expected to bring in maybe $12.7 billion in revenue this year, and they're currently losing money because training these giant models is insanely expensive.
The math just doesn't add up on the surface. Where does $300 billion come from?
This is our first huge knowledge gap. Funding risk.
Right. And the sources we looked at suggest the answer might lie in this really intricate financial arrangement. Some analysts are calling it the cash carousel.
Okay, explain the cash carousel. How does it work?
Well, it seems to involve NVIDIA as well. Oracle needs to buy billions of dollars worth of NVIDIA's expensive AI chips, the GPUs, to build these data centers for OpenAI.
Okay.
Conveniently, NVIDIA, through its investment arm, announced a major partnership with OpenAI, pledging to invest up to $100 billion in them.
Ah, I see where this is going.
And reports suggest a big chunk of that NVIDIA investment, maybe $45 billion or so, is directly linked to funding this massive capacity build-out with Oracle.
So let's trace the money, step by step. Outside investors or maybe NVIDIA's own cash.
Flows into OpenAI as investment.
OpenAI then immediately turns around and uses that same cash to pay Oracle for the data centers and cloud services Oracle is building using NVIDIA chips.
Exactly. It's this closed loop. Outside money gets funneled through OpenAI and lands on Oracle's books as deferred revenue money received for services not yet delivered.
Which makes everyone involved look really good on paper, right?
Absolutely. It inflates the apparent health and future prospects of Oracle, NVIDIA, and OpenAI, making them look much stronger than their immediate organic cash flow might actually support. It creates these huge paper valuations built almost entirely on commitments funded by this circular flow.
It sounds a bit like financial engineering.
It certainly raises questions about sustainability.
Because the reality check is, even if that $45 billion from NVIDIA materializes, OpenAI still needs to find the other $255 billion to meet its $300 billion promise to Oracle.
Right. That money has to come from somewhere. Either OpenAI needs to become wildly, unprecedentedly profitable in the next few years,
Which seems unlikely given current costs.
or they need to raise another $250 billion in additional outside funding.
Which is also a huge ask.
So, the entire foundation of Oracle's recent stock surge, that $455 billion backlog number, it rests on the assumption that this missing $255 billion will appear.
And if it doesn't, if that funding dries up, or if OpenAI faces financial trouble or gets restructured,
that backlog revenue just vanishes. Poof, gone. That's why this dependency is such a critical, maybe even systemic financial risk baked into Oracle's current market value. Hashtag C. The margin dilemma and obsolescence.
Okay, but let's play devil's advocate. Let's say somehow the $300 billion does materialize for OpenAI.
Yeah.
Can Oracle actually make money delivering that service?
The margin question. Because a huge backlog doesn't mean much if you lose money on every dollar of service you provide.
Exactly. This brings us to the margin dilemma. Oracle's traditional business was software, right? ERP, CRM systems.
Yeah, and that was incredibly profitable. You spend a lot up front developing the software and setting up sales, sure, but adding one more customer costs almost nothing, zero marginal cost, essentially.
Which led to really high gross margins. What were they, like 81% in 2022 for those segments combined?
Around that, yeah. Very juicy margins.
But this new business, the AI cloud data centers that are driving the stock surge, it's the complete opposite kind of business cost-wise.
Totally opposite. It requires gigantic upfront capital spending, buying land, constructing buildings, filling them with networking gear, and crucially, constantly buying and replacing incredibly expensive NVIDIA GPUs.
Plus, the ongoing costs must be enormous. Electricity, cooling.
Huge operational expenses, especially power.
So as this lower margin cloud business grew, now making up over half their revenue in that segment.
The overall gross margins for the combined segment naturally dropped, down to around 72%, which is still good, but clearly lower. The question is, how low can the data center part go?
And this is where we found that really shocking detail in the sources, reportedly from internal Oracle documents for a specific recent quarter.
Yeah, this was eye-opening. Those specialized AI server rentals, the core of this new strategy, they apparently generated only a 14% gross profit margin.
14% on roughly $900 million in revenue for that quarter ending August 2025.
One of four. That is razor thin, especially for a business that needs constant, massive reinvestment just to stand still.
And here's the kicker. Oracle publicly tells investors they expect this AI infrastructure segment to achieve 35% gross margins.
Right, so you have reported reality, allegedly 14%, versus the public projection of 35%. That enormous 21-point gap.
That gap is the entire justification for the company's massive run-up in stock price. The market is betting they can somehow get from 14% to 35%.
Which leads us to our second critical knowledge gap, financial viability. How? What's the actual concrete plan to bridge that huge margin gap?
Are they just going to hike prices massively on customers like OpenAI? Are they banking on some unproven magical economies of scale kicking in? Or maybe some creative accounting?
It's a huge unanswered question. And it gets even worse when you factor in the biggest threat to profitability here.
Which isn't the buildings falling down.
No, it's the hardware becoming obsolete incredibly quickly. We're talking economic obsolescence, not physical wear and tear.
Technology just gets outdated too fast.
Astoundingly fast. Look at GPUs. The bandwidth, the speed basically quadrupled in just 5 years. From NVIDIA's A100 chip at 2 terabytes per second to their newer B200 at 8 terabytes per second.
So if Oracle spent billions filling a data center with A100s 3 years ago,
those chips are already borderline useless for cutting-edge AI training today. They're too slow.
and this isn't just theoretical, right? It hits the bottom line immediately.
Oh, yeah. We're already seeing reports that the rental prices for slightly older but still powerful chips like the H100, they dropped by 30% in just 2 years once the next faster chip was announced.
So Oracle is stuck on this incredibly fast, expensive treadmill. They have to keep spending billions on the latest, greatest GPUs every 18 to 24 months just to stay in the game.
And that constant, massive replacement cost eats directly into those already questionable margins. It makes achieving that 35% target look even more challenging.
Okay, so we have Oracle's deep structural power over data rails, plus this massive, highly leveraged financial bet on AI infrastructure, with some serious questions around its viability. Let's talk about where this could all lead, the future implications.
Right, especially when you mix this technical and financial power with deep political connections and the potential for controlling narratives.
This is where it gets really concerning, potentially. What happens when the entity controlling the infrastructure also starts influencing the message? #tagged A, political and governmental influence.
Well, Oracle's political influence isn't new. They've been a major player in Washington, D.C. for years. Millions spent annually on donations, sophisticated lobbying.
And you see their senior executives moving in and out of high-level government jobs, right? That classic revolving door.
Exactly. It creates this sense of a deeply interwoven tech political complex.
And does that sustained political investment pay off commercially?
It certainly seems to create opportunities, whether it's direct cause and effect or just favorable positioning. The prime example everyone points to is TikTok.
Ah, yes. Project Texas. Oracle becoming the trusted technology partner to handle TikTok's U.S. data and operations amid all those geopolitical security concerns.
Right. An arrangement that gives Oracle, significant insight and potentially influence, although the details are murky over the data flow, maybe even the algorithm, for a hugely popular social media platform.
And while the security argument for using a U.S. company makes sense on the surface,
the process itself seemed unusually opaque, not the kind of transparent, competitive bidding you might expect for such a critical and potentially lucrative role.
and there was that weird valuation issue reported around the deal too, wasn't there?
Yeah, that was striking. Independent analysts looked at standard industry metrics, how you value social media or media companies based on their sale.
Price to sales ratios.
Right. And they estimated the true market value of TikTok's U.S. operation was probably 10 times higher, conservatively, than the roughly $14 billion cost associated with the Oracle deal to implement Project Texas.
10 times lower. That's a huge discrepancy.
It suggests a potentially very advantageous deal for Oracle, approved by the government, that perhaps emerged, maybe coincidentally, maybe not, from those years of cultivating political influence and connections. It's a clear case of political access potentially creating unique commercial leverage over structural data control. Hashtag B, the media conglomerate risk.
Okay, so political influence is one layer. Now let's add another layer. The risk of massive media consolidation driven by the wider Ellison family.
Yeah, this connects the dots between data processing power and actual narrative delivery, which is a powerful combination.
So Larry Ellison's son, David Ellison, he founded Skydance Media.
Correct, reportedly, with significant seed funding from his father. And Skydance hasn't been sitting still. They've been on an aggressive acquisition path.
Most recently taking over Paramount Global, right? Creating Paramount Skydance.
Yep, and the ambition doesn't seem to stop there. Reports suggest they're now eyeing an even bigger fish, Warner Brothers Discovery.
Wow, if they pull that off, merging Paramount, Skydance, and Warner Brothers Discovery,
You'd instantly have one of the largest traditional media conglomerates in history, controlling vast libraries of movies, TV shows, news outlets, major intellectual property, just enormous reach.
and how does this connect back to Oracle's core business?
The synergy is pretty direct and, frankly, a bit concerning. David Ellison is known to be a big proponent of using AI to dramatically cut costs in film and TV production.
And generating AI movies and effects requires.
Massive amounts of computing power, exactly the kind of specialized AI infrastructure that Oracle is betting its future on selling.
So you have the father's company providing the picks and shovels for the AI gold rush, and the son's company potentially becoming one of the biggest users of that AI in media creation.
Precisely. And this all leads to the looming succession question. Larry Ellison is, what, 81 now? Eventually that influence, that control gets passed down.
And we could be looking at a scenario where one family or one tightly controlled interest holds sway over.
Potentially one of the biggest social media platforms via the TikTok infrastructure deal, and one of the largest traditional media and news platforms through the Skydance Paramount WBD consolidation.
That's a staggering concentration of power. Control over the technical rails and control over the narrative content.
It's the convergence that's worrying. When the ability to manage the data graph and execute policy meets the ability to shape the public story, that's a whole new level of structural influence. Potentially unchecked, largely unaudited, crossing contexts in a way we haven't really seen before at this scale. Hashtag C breaches, accountability, and long-term governance.
Okay, let's ground this again. We've talked about structural power, finance, media. What happens when things go wrong in these complex, interconnected systems Oracle runs?
Right, because the risk here isn't just market crashes, it's personal. Failure in these systems looks like mass identity theft. It looks like patient-sensitive medical histories being exposed. It looks like systematic credit fraud ruining lives, or targeted doxing enabled by leaked data.
And these failures, they don't always happen because of some sophisticated nation-state hacker, do they?
Often not. More frequently, it's the result of the sheer crushing complexity of the systems themselves. A simple cloud server misconfiguration by an overworked admin, poor password management, a vulnerability introduced way down the supply chain through some third-party software component, mundane errors with catastrophic consequences.
And figuring out who's actually to blame when something does go wrong.
It becomes incredibly difficult, almost by design. Was it Oracle's cloud platform that had the flaw? Was it the consulting firm, the system integrator who set it up incorrectly? Or was it the government agency's own staff who maybe mishandled credentials or policies?
Everyone points fingers.
Exactly. And the opacity, the layers of technical complexity make it nearly impossible for outsiders, regulators, investigators, journalists, even the affected citizens to reliably reconstruct what actually happened and assign clear responsibility.
Which effectively shields the decision makers, right? The architects, the executives who approve the system designs or cut corners on security.
They're often insulated from real consequences. There's plausible deniability built into the complexity.
And the harm itself often doesn't show up immediately.
That's another huge problem. Identity theft might surface months later. Problems with pension payments or insurance eligibility might take years to become apparent. And that time lag makes it exponentially harder to connect the damage back to the specific technical failure or poor decision that caused it way back when. Accountability just dissolves over time. Hashtag D. Knowledge gaps and provocative questions for the listener. So, okay. We've covered the structural power, the shaky finances behind the AI bet, the political links, the media consolidation risk, the accountability problem. Where does that leave us?
It leaves us with some pretty significant unanswered questions, areas where we and you, the listener, need more clarity. Let's frame these as our key knowledge gaps coming out of this deep dive.
Sounds good.
Knowledge gap 1, financial viability, the big one. Will Oracle actually hit that 35% gross margin target for its AI data centers? Or is the reported 14% closer to the long-term reality? Because the answer fundamentally determines if their current stock valuation is built on solid ground or optimistic projections.
Knowledge gap 2, funding risk, specifically around OpenAI. How are they going to find that missing $255 billion to pay Oracle? What happens to Oracle's $455 billion backlog, the linchpin of their recent success story if that funding doesn't materialize, or if that key client relationship implodes? The domino effect could be huge.
And knowledge gap 3, governance. This might be the most important long-term question as we see this potential merging of core data infrastructure control and massive media platform control, possibly under one family's influence. What new rules do we need? What kind of cross-context governance models can actually prevent this immense structural power from becoming unchecked, pervasive influence over both our data and our public discourse? Hashtag OUTRO.
So wrapping this all up, look, the debate around asset managers like BlackRock, the whole money rails conversation, it's absolutely important. We need that scrutiny.
No doubt. It's the visible giant, as you said.
But what we've argued today is that the quiet machinery, the databases, the APIs, the EHRs, the government backbones, that stuff deserves equal, probably even greater attention right now.
Because that control over the flow of critical information,
Mm-hmm.
it's just a fundamentally different type of leverage, maybe more insidious because it's less visible than controlling capital.
Yeah. We really need to shift some focus. Stop just watching who has the most money and start watching who controls the actual digital and physical pipes that our lives and institutions increasingly depend on.
So the final thought we want to leave you with today is something to maybe think about or dig into yourself. Those seemingly boring technical decisions about where critical data resides, who gets to audit it, what format it's in, they aren't just technical choices anymore.
No, they're becoming fundamental governance choices.
It's exactly. Choices that directly shape the integrity, the reliability, and the fairness of the very life rails your existence runs on. Something to watch closely. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.